Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS College Football Week 6. We got 4 games on Friday night, 4 college football games. I'm going to go through all 4 in this video. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWAS. The SWAS. SWAS. Hey, get the SWAS.
First up, Jacksonville State on the road in Kennesaw State. We're looking at a Conference USA matchup here. This number's up to 16.5. Was down at 14.5 earlier in the week. Total sitting at 49. I do see a couple 48.5s out there. So let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to this data, action is coming in heavily on the Kennesaw State side. Over 90% of the tickets, over 95% of the money. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and obviously I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. Kennesaw State, brand new to the FBS. I don't know a ton about the program, but still we'll take a quick look. We'll start with the Jacksonville State offense. Obviously coming into the season, we thought Logan Smothers was going to be the quarterback. That lasted about 2.5 quarters into the Coastal Carolina game. They were getting smoked, which I loved because I had Coastal Carolina money line in that. That was an absolute blowout. Tyler Huff took over the quarterback job, and he's been there ever since. Was a little shaky for a little while. I mean, his first ever start was against Louisville. Obviously, it's not the easiest spot for a Jacksonville State quarterback to be in, but take a look at the Jacksonville State passing numbers in their last 2 games. Coming around over 273 yards per game, 11.95 yards per attempt, over a 54% success rate per drop back. Jacksonville State's been throwing the ball. This kid Huff, maybe he can throw it. I don't know a ton about him, but it's not like these games were against FCS opponents. They played Eastern Michigan and Southern Miss. Back-to-back great games throwing the ball against FBS opponents. If you look at the Jacksonville State offensive numbers on the year, they're actually 30th in the country in yards per play. Obviously, that's just raw data, not schedule adjusted. 54th in yards per carry, 18th in yards per pass attempt. The schedule adjusted metrics, 99th in OFEI, 94th in effective rush, 77th in effective pass. So how do they match up against the Kennesaw State defense? Well, I mean, these numbers are just Kennesaw State, obviously, like I said, it's their first year in the FBS. Obviously, they're expected to struggle here. Their last game, they played an FCS opponent, UT Martin, and they actually lost. But we're going to look at the numbers from the first 3 games against FBS opponents. They're struggling to defend the pass here. 297.3 passing yards allowed per game, 9.13 yards per attempt, over a 50% success rate per dropback. So based on what we saw Huff do to Eastern Michigan and Southern Miss, he should have no problem throwing the ball in this Kennesaw State defense. Again, I don't know a ton about them, but based on the data we have here, should be able to throw the ball on them. But honestly, we should be spending more time looking at the rushing numbers because we know Rich Rodriguez likes to run the ball. 37th in rushing frequency is actually down from last year, so they're throwing the ball a bit more than they did last year, but this is still an offense that wants to run. Kennesaw State's run defense numbers actually not that bad. 69th in yards per carry, 72nd in success rate. Again, the schedule adjusted numbers are a little farther back. 97th in effective rush. They have played games against FCS opponents. We saw Louisiana bulldoze this Kennesaw State defense on their home field a couple weeks back. 258 rushing yards, over 7.3 yards per carry in the game. But you know what? We do have to give Kennesaw State some credit here. Yeah, the Cajuns ran all over them, but in their other 2 FBS games, they held UTSA and San Jose State to 2.34 yards per carry, just 69 rushing yards per game, 35.1% success rate. So they actually look really good against the run in their other 2 FBS games. And this Jacksonville State run game is definitely not the Jacksonville State run game from last year. First 3 games, they were averaging just over 130 rushing yards per game, just 4.17 yards per carry. That's way down from what we were seeing from them last year. But then last week against Southern Miss, they got it going. 273 yards on the ground, 5.69 yards per carry, over 52% success rate on the ground. So the run game finally showed up for Jacksonville State. This Kennesaw State defense, I mean, on paper, it shows that they're stronger against the run, but I mean, I really don't know. Now let's flip it around and look at the Kennesaw State offense, and wow. I mean, look at these. This is crazy. They're pretty much dead last, 134th, almost across the board. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this. 133rd in yards per play, 134th in success rate, 132nd in PPA. This is easily the worst rushing attack in the country. They're 134th in effective rush, 133, 134. Yeah, this is about as bad as it gets in terms of FBS offenses. Their quarterback's name is Davis Bryson. Not going to pretend to know a ton about him. His numbers certainly aren't impressive. 538 yards, 5.5 yards per attempt, a touchdown, and 3 picks. And as far as trying to establish the run, I mean, in their 3 games against FBS opponents, Kennesaw State's averaging just 1.97 yards per carry, 75.3 rushing yards per game, 26.1% success rate. Not much in terms of a passing attack either, just 141 passing yards per game. This is in the 3 games against FBS opponents, 6.5 yards per attempt, 28% success rate per dropback. So yeah, there's really no other way to say it other than this is still an FCS offense. I mean, the run defense might be able to play at this level, but in terms of defending the pass, in terms of moving the football, this is still an FCS program. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to spend any more time on this game. Personally, I'm not laying 16.5 with Jacksonville State. I was down on them entering the year. In the offseason streams, I took Jacksonville State under 7.5, or I think I got it at 7, under 7 wins. So I'm not a big fan of this Jacksonville State team. I certainly am not going to lay 16.5, 17 points on the road with them, but I can't in good faith put my money on Kennesaw State. I don't know much about them. So for the video, I'll say Kennesaw State plus the points, but no chance in hell I'm betting this game. Next, Big 12 matchup up next. Houston on the road at TCU. TCU now laying 16.5. This was up at 17. Looks like it's been bought down. Total sitting at 51 or 51.5, depending on your sports book. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, action's coming in heavy on the Houston side. 85% of the tickets, over 90% of the money on the Houston Cougars, according to this data. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So before we get into this one, we should mention that these 2 teams played last year. It was Houston's first year in the Big 12. TCU gave them a welcome party. In week 3, they beat the hell out of them, 36-13. TCU was laying 7 points in the game. So how do we think they match up this year? Houston offensively, 47th in run frequency. Donovan Smith hasn't been able to get it going. Here are the Houston offensive numbers on the season: 110th in OFEI, 100th in yards per play, 125th in success rate. Run game hasn't really been there. Passing attack hasn't really been there at all. In their last 2 games, they've scored 0 points. Literally 0. They are averaging 0 points per game in their last 2 games. They've been shut out back-to-back games, 32% offensive success rate, just 4.76 yards per play. It is truly ugly here for Houston's offense. Donovan Smith not having the season we were expecting. Not that we were expecting Houston's offense to do anything spectacular, but we know Donovan Smith is capable of making plays. We've seen him win big football games before. He's got just 676 passing yards on the season, 6.3 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns to 5 picks. They actually announced that they're going to be alternating quarterbacks. Zion Chris, the kid from Louisiana, who we saw at the end of the game against Iowa State, looks like they're going to be splitting snaps, I guess. I do remember watching him last year with the Cajuns. Personally, I don't think this is an upgrade. I think Donovan Smith is more talented, but I guess maybe it's a way to motivate him. Really not sure. Not going to pretend to know what's going on in the Houston locker room. Just reading what they announced, that they're going to be splitting snaps at quarterback. It's crazy. This Houston offense has got to be one of the toughest units in college football to get a feel for. Want to know where their best game was? On the road in Norman, against the best defense they've seen all year, one of the best defenses in the country, at Oklahoma. 260 yards passing, 9.3 yards per attempt, a 60% success rate per dropback. That's excellent. Their best offensive performance was on the road at Oklahoma. How do they follow that up? By getting shut out twice in a row, once by Cincinnati. The Iowa State game, okay, that's a really good defense. Cincinnati shut them out. Just 82 passing yards per game in those 2 games, 4.45 yards per attempt, 24.4 success rate per dropback. Truly terrible. Now, the good news for Houston is TCU's defense certainly isn't anything to call home about. 94th in yards per carry allowed, 106th in success rate, 86th in effective rush. They have been slightly stronger against the pass, but as a whole, this defense is sitting at 78th in DFEI. This is not a defensive program. We thought it was going to be better. Looks to be the same old TCU, offense first all the way. We do have to give them some credit for their numbers against the pass, though. Other than the UCF game, UCF lit them up. 230 passing yards, 10.5 yards per pass attempt, over a 47% success rate per dropback. UCF was able to throw the ball on them, but their other 4 games, they played great defense against the pass. Just 137.3 passing yards per game allowed, just 5.05 yards per attempt. So they really have been playing good defense against the pass. It's their defense against the run that's a concern. Here are their defensive line metrics. I mean, you can see they're getting blown off the ball here. 116th in line yards, 116th in stuff rate, 133rd in power success rate. Not that Houston's offensive line is doing anything in terms of run blocking. I mean, they're pretty much bottom 30, bottom 35 in the country across the board here. But if you look at the right side of this graphic, Houston's actually been okay in terms of pass protection. They've done a good job keeping their quarterback protected. So maybe against a TCU defensive front that doesn't have the greatest pass rush, maybe now that they announce that there's a quarterback battle and they're going to be splitting snaps, maybe he comes out motivated. I mean, we have seen that happen before at the collegiate level and at the NFL level. So, I mean, does make sense. And Donovan Smith, he is capable of playing football at a high level. So maybe against this TCU defense, he's able to snap out of it. I mean, he should have some run support here. In the last 3 games, Houston's averaging 5.23 yards per carry, 183 yards per game on the ground. One of those games against Iowa State, too. Very good defense. As we mentioned before, TCU's defensive front has not played well, allowing 5.39 yards per carry, 231.7 rushing yards per game in their last 3. So maybe give Donovan Smith a run game, motivate him, threaten him with some splitting snaps, give him some pass protection. Maybe he's able to make plays against a TCU defense that isn't that great. But here's the thing. We're sitting here criticizing TCU's defense, saying, look at the numbers from the last 3 games. Look at who they've played. At Kansas, at SMU, versus UCF. Those are 3 really dynamic rushing attacks. I mean, those are probably 3 top 25 rushing attacks right there. Houston does not compare to these 3 offenses. So I really don't know what to make of Houston. Talent-wise, they're more than capable of putting a lot of points up on TCU. But based on the production we've seen so far, it's really hard to put any money on that happening. Now, what about the other side? What about the TCU offense? Well, we already know what it is on this side of the ball. It's Sonny Dykes' offense. They're throwing the ball a lot, running a really quick pace. 9th in passing frequency, 23rd in pace. Josh Hoover, I believe, is 2nd in the entire country in passing yards so far this year. This is a top 10, maybe even a top 5 passing attack. 23rd in yards per pass attempt, 13th in success rate per dropback, 4th in effective pass. Flirting with an idea of being a top 25 offense overall here. They're 27th in OFEI. Rushing numbers need to come up. I mean, they don't have much of a run game, but they don't really ever run the ball. Here are Josh Hoover's numbers on the season. Almost 1,800 yards passing already, 8.8 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. TCU as a team is averaging 364.8 passing yards per game. 51.9% success rate per dropback is very impressive. And it's not like they're racking up stats in non-conference games. Look at their 2 Big 12 games so far this year. 379 passing yards per game, 8.6 yards per attempt, 54.4 success rate per dropback. So they're throwing the ball on in the non-conference games as well as the conference games. But here's the thing. They're matched up against Houston, and when we're talking about Houston's offense, we could laugh, we could poke holes in it, we can make fun of it. It's terrible, it's a mess. But Houston's defense is pretty good. This is actually probably a top 40 defense in the country. I'm going to pull up TCU's last 3 opponents again because we were just looking at this graphic when we were talking about their defense. We were like, how can we criticize TCU's defense? Look at the offenses they've seen. Well, all 3 of these teams are offensive programs. None of these teams have a particularly elite defense. In fact, you could probably make the argument Houston has a better defense than all 3. Yes, I realize Cincinnati and Sorsby made some plays on them early in that game. I think they got up to, I think it was like a 24-0 first half lead, and then Houston's offense is so bad that the game was just over at that point. So if you look at the passing numbers in that game, yeah, Cincinnati was very efficient throwing the ball on Houston, 11.2 yards per attempt. I get it. But look at their defense in their other 4 games. Just 131 passing yards per game allowed, 5.53 yards per attempt, 32.2% success rate per dropback. It's been a great pass defense other than the Cincinnati game where they turned the ball over early, and that game was just over before it started, honestly. Look at their pass defense numbers in their last game against Iowa State. We know Rocco Beck can throw the ball. 153 yards allowed through the air, just 5.5 yards per attempt. They did a good job defensively in that game. I took Houston plus 16 because I was like, guys, I don't think Iowa State can move the ball on Houston. I had Houston plus 16. They lost the game 20-0. I took Houston plus 16 because I said, guys, Iowa State isn't going to be able to score many points on Houston. Spot on. I just didn't realize Houston was going to get shut out. Wow. What a frustration. And you know what? Iowa State got the cover on a 77-yard run. too, like late in the game. Oh my God. Sickening. Sick. I don't want to talk about last week. Let's keep going. Now, I want to make it clear, I don't think Houston's defense can shut down Josh Hoover and the TCU passing attack. It's too good, especially when they don't really have the best pass rush. Just 63rd in sack rate, 78th in pressure rate. TCU's offensive line, not great in terms of creating space in the run game, but they can protect the passer. So Josh Hoover is going to have pockets to throw from, and he's been very good. He's going to make some plays, but I really doubt he's going to have run support in this one. In 4 of their 5 games, TCU couldn't run the ball at all. In the first 4 games, just 2.95 yards per carry. They did get the run game going a little bit in the Kansas game, but Kansas defense isn't really comparable to Houston's defense. It's much better. Houston, on the other hand, has been great against the run in all of their games except the Iowa State game. In their first 4 games, just 3.68 yards per carry. They played some decent teams in there, too, on the road at Oklahoma. Yeah, in the Iowa State game, they allowed 6.32 yards per carry, but like I said, they let up a 77-yard run in the fourth quarter that obviously make these numbers look way worse than they actually were. They had a 35% success rate, which means as a whole, they were playing pretty decent defense against the run. Look, I'm not laying 16.5 with TCU. It's kind of like we were saying about the what we used to say on the live show during NBA season when the Pacers were laying like 9. You can't bet on a team to win by a margin that doesn't play defense, and TCU's defense just isn't good enough to lay this number. So it would only be Houston for me here. At the moment, I don't have a bet on this game, but it'll be Houston plus 16.5, as disgusting as that sounds. Next game. Big Ten up next. We got Michigan State out in Eugene. Ducks are laying 23.5 points at home. Total sitting at 52.5 mostly. There are a couple 52s out there if you look. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, action's coming in on the Michigan State side. Over 60% of the tickets, over 60% of the money. But again, as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's talk about the Michigan State offense. And I got to give Jonathan Smith some credit. He's letting Childs cook. For better or worse, you know, a lot of these coaches, they have a freshman quarterback. They'll play conservative. He's letting Childs go out there and try to win football games. We've seen some good. We've seen some really bad. He's definitely made some mistakes, as you would expect a freshman to do. The Michigan State offense as a whole sitting at 99th in OFEI. Not much run support he's getting. 81st in yards per carry, 81st in success rate, 102nd in effective rush, which is a little surprising because they do have 2 solid backs. So I expected Michigan State to be able to run the ball a bit better than this. As far as Childs' passing numbers, 51st in the country in yards per attempt, just 86th in success rate, 72nd in effective pass. Here are Childs' numbers on the year. I mean, 7.8 yards per attempt. He's making some plays. 9 interceptions. Definitely not something you'd love to see. QB rating is in the toilet. Turnover-worthy play rate in the toilet. As I said, he is a freshman, and Jonathan Smith just kind of letting him go for it, which I respect, honestly. This game is in Eugene, so we pull up Aiden Childs' home-away splits. He's played 2 road games so far this year. 36.5 pass attempts per game in those road games. Most of his volume have come, I shouldn't say most of his volume. He's getting much more passing volume in his road games, over 300 passing yards per game in those 2 road games. The problem is he's also averaging 3 interceptions per game in those 2 road games. 6 of his 9 interceptions have come in his 2 road games. So I'm expecting Jonathan Smith to let his guy go out there and try to play with this Oregon Ducks team. That's what we saw last week against Ohio State. And you know what? Childs was playing with the Buckeyes defense for the first half. In the first half, he was 10 of 12, 143 yards, 11.9 yards per attempt and a touchdown. He showed us he can play at this level. Now, in the second half, Ohio State made some adjustments and he came crashing down to earth, but he showed us something in that first half. So I'm expecting Jonathan Smith to do the same thing here. Let his guy Childs go out there and try to throw the ball on this Oregon defense, and we'll see what happens. I mean, they're 23.5, 24-point underdogs. What could go wrong? What do you have to lose at this point? Now, the downside of that plan is Oregon's a top 25 defense, possibly a top 10 defense against the pass. They're 4th in the country in yards per pass attempt allowed, 10th in success rate per dropback, 3rd in effective pass. They're sitting at 14th in DFEI, so this is not going to be an easy task for Aiden Childs. On top of that, they have an elite pass rush, 15th in pass rush grade, 47th in sack rate, 19th in pressure rate, 1st in pass rush win rate. So he's going to be under duress here because Michigan State's offensive line certainly isn't doing him any favors in pass protection. They're 128th in pass blocking grade, 73rd in sack rate allowed, 106th in pressure rate allowed. Now, Oregon's defense has shown us this year that they can be vulnerable to the run. I mentioned before how Michigan State's rushing attack's been a little disappointing. We have seen it, though. last week, look, it's Ohio State. I'm not expecting them to run the ball on Ohio State, but in the first 3 games of the season, they were averaging 4.92 yards per carry, 165.7 rushing yards per game. A lot of that was Childs, but I mean, they are capable of running the ball. It's definitely been disappointing, and if you look at the numbers from the last 2 games, yeah, it looks pretty bad. The Ohio State game's in there, just 3 yards per carry, 87 rushing yards per game. But I don't know if we can really rely on the run game being there for Michigan State. I mean, yeah, if we look at the full season numbers, sure, it looks like Oregon is a little bit vulnerable to the run. But if you take a closer look, it was really just Genty in the Boise State game, 221 yards on the ground, 6.7 yards per carry. That was really the game that Oregon got run on. If you look at their run defense numbers from their other 3 games, 75.7 rushing yards per game allowed, 2.99 yards per carry. So I don't think we can count on the run game being there for Michigan State. As a whole, on this side of the ball, it's going to come down to Childs. I mean, he's shown us he can make plays on the Ohio State defense. He's talented enough to play with the guys on this Oregon defense. Obviously, he's still a freshman. We'll see. It's going to be Aiden Childs' hero ball. We'll see what he's got. On the other side, we got the Oregon offense, and I mean, this is going to be a quick one here. They're balanced. This is one of the best offenses in the country. In fact, according to FEI ratings, they're number one in OFEI. Number 3 in effective pass. Their rushing numbers 39th, 35th, and 36th. So they can run the ball as well. Pretty well-rounded. Dylan Gabriel next to 1,200 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. C+, big-time throw rate. They haven't asked him to throw the ball downfield much, but, I mean, this offense is dangerous as hell. And also, he hasn't been put in many positions where they needed him to yet. Now they're matched up against the Michigan State defense, who, honestly, I think has been surprisingly pretty good. They're 31st in yards per play allowed, 37th in success rate, 43rd in PPA. Solid numbers against the run. They do have a couple good linebackers. A little vulnerable against the pass. 60th in yards per pass attempt, 85th in success rate per dropback, 57th in effective pass. The strength of this Michigan State defense so far this year has been defending the run. So I guess maybe you can make a case for Michigan State giving Oregon some problems trying to establish the run, but between Dylan Gabriel and Dan Lanning in that passing attack, I don't think Michigan State will have many answers for it. So where does that leave us in terms of placing a bet? Well, I think it's pretty simple, actually. This is how I see the game going. As I said earlier, I think we're going to see Aiden Childs try to play hero ball, right? And we know he's the man. He's a 5-star recruit, supposed to be the next NFL superstar, right? So he's going to go on the road here in Eugene and try to play hero ball. The result of that is going to be one of 2 things. One, he has a great game and is able to play Oregon tough, in which case Michigan State will cover. Or 2, he turns the ball over so many times that Oregon wins by 50 points. But I think Path A and Path B both lead to points. Either he's going to score points with Michigan State or he's going to turn the ball over and give Oregon easy points. So why not take an over here? 52.5 is a little bit of a low total. I'm a little worried that Oregon's been running a slower pace. Honestly, Michigan State's not running the quickest pace either. That's probably why the total's so low. But yeah, give me the over. 52.5. I haven't bet this yet, but as I was talking about this game and going through the notes, I kind of talked myself into it. So I'll put a few dollars on the over here. Next game. Next up is Syracuse UNLV. The Rebels are laying 6.5 points at home. Total's at 57.5. I was going to go through this game, but honestly, my adrenaline is pumping right now. Pete Alonso just hit a go-ahead 3-run homer, and the Mets just won. So I'm too fired up to go through it. I learned my lesson last week. I'm not fading UNLV, especially with a Syracuse defense that can't stop the run. UNLV has one of the most dynamic rushing attacks in the country, honestly. This is a top 25 rushing attack. Syracuse cannot stop the run. Not to mention, UNLV's offense looked awesome last week with the new quarterback. He looks better than Sluka. And what really gives me the confidence here is how good UNLV's defense looked against Mikey Keene and Fresno last week. I personally took Fresno plus 2.5. I thought Mikey Keene being a pocket passer, the first one UNLV's seen on the season, that he could pick apart the UNLV secondary. He couldn't do anything. So, look, Kyle McCord looked really good to start the season. He's starting to fall off a bit. Syracuse is probably going to make plays in the passing game here, but UNLV looks unstoppable. So I would lean towards the UNLV side at minus 6.5. If you don't trust the UNLV defense and you like McCord, maybe look towards an over. But for me, it'll be UNLV minus 6.5 or UNLV team total over, because that offense is a powerhouse. I don't think Syracuse can stop it. Sorry to cut the video short. I'm really fired up right now. If you want to go see all the bets I have open for college football this weekend and the NFL, I have like 5 NFL bets open already. Head over to KyleKirms.com and click on open bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Also, if you signed up to Sauce Network Plus, it comes with access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. $150 cash, and one of these trophies go to the winner every single week. So if you're interested, head over to the website and sign up. Let's have ourselves a nice Friday night here. 4 college football games. Live show will be at 4 p.m. We'll go through them all. I'll talk about this game a little more then when I've regained my composure. Let's have ourselves a good one. Remember to bet responsibly. See you on the live show.